Yes. We're live streaming, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. At 6 p.m. and I open this agenda forum. I'd like to start by saying Kaya Kartajin Whadjuk Noongar Budja. Hello, I acknowledge we're on Whadjuk Noongar land, and the City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and their descendants. I welcome all council staff and members in the public gallery and all residents to the first agenda forum of this new year, and hope it's a happy and prosperous one for everyone. Item 2 is the disclaimer. The terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery, and members in the public gallery are advised to read them prior to attending the meeting. Item 3, attendance and apologies. I believe all councillors are in attendance, other than Councillor Prodovnik, who is attending electronically with approval. Councillor Prodovnik, can you confirm you're in a secure and private location in case any items of confidential nature are later discussed? Are you there, Councillor Prodovnik? Can we see if we can get Councillor Prodovnik online? She's got to make that declaration, but I'll continue in the meantime. Item 4, declarations of financial and proximity interest or interests affecting impartiality. Mr. CEO, have we any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 declarations this evening. We have declarations of partiality on item 4.3 from Councillor Bowman. We have a declaration of impartiality on item C3.1 from Councillor Johnson, and a declaration of impartiality on item C3.5 from Councillor Zanino.
Thank you. Moving on, item 5, public question time. Questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. No, we'll go to 5.1. Questions which notice being taken on notice. There are nil. Questions without notice is nil. And we move to item 6, reports and notices of motion. I've got nil at this stage. 6.1, additional information from officers is nil. And 6.2, deputations. In accordance with the current procedures for public participation in agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations are required by 10 a.m. today, February 1st, and all written deputations received by 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the 31st of January, were circulated with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. We are nil in Part A. Moving to Part B, the first item is 2.2, the draft Heritage Local Planning Policy. It's on page 47 of your agenda, councillors. And the first in-person deputation is Mr. Patrick Irwin, not in support of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Irwin. You have 5 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you.
Councillors, Happy New Year. I'm speaking on the Draft Heritage Local Policy Planning Policy, POL LP 1.17. I'm speaking against the amendments, or certain of the amendments, significant amendments as proposed in front of you. This area where we live, the Swan Valley and the hills, is richly blessed with assets, natural heritage, indigenous heritage, and built heritage, particularly in the Swan Valley and Midland and Guildford. This is the background to why it's important that we have an effective heritage policy. Of course, I was extremely supportive of this policy when I first saw it because it supported the Heritage Act, the WA Heritage Act 2018. The amendments that concern me appear to work the other way. The ones, my first point of concern is that the incentives for retention of heritage places in development should be reinstated. This is the amendment number 6. I think it's self-evident why we should have positive encouragement to retain development and to retain heritage places within development. It's sustainability, long life, loose fit. Point 2, that the engagement of HECWA or National Trust recommended persons to the Heritage Advisory Panel should also be reinstated. And again, I think this should be self-evident because, as I've just been discussing with another person in the gallery, some of the points in the Planning Act and even in the policy require understanding and interpretation, and that people who have consultants and expertise who are trained in this area have better understanding and better guidance for understanding heritage policy matters. So I believe that the HECWA National Trust recommendations for consultants onto the Heritage Advisory Panel should be reinstated. Point 3, that the words which are shown to be added imply that engagement of persons who belong to a historical society will take precedence over persons from a ratepayers or other association to that Heritage Advisory Panel. And this is despite how experienced the persons may be who are not in a historical society, or how inexperienced are persons in the historical society. It should be on knowledge base, expertise, and again, that if they're a HECWA recommended consultant for heritage matters, then they should, in my opinion, be given precedence. So the reason I bring these up is because the original draft, as I said, supported the WA Heritage Act in many significant matters, which is progressive in the City of Swan. Heritage has not had a great run in the time I've been coming before you over these years. We've seen a lot of heritage places demolished. We've seen misunderstandings of what heritage significance is. And we know, for instance, that property owners till recently could object to having their places on the municipal inventory. And we have very low-level assessments here. Within Midland, for instance, we only have one property which is Category 2, whereas if you go and look at Bayswater or Bassendean, or even Guildford, you'll find a lot more places of equivalence on higher. So I'm concerned here about assessments as well. We need more rigour and more responsibility for protecting these wonderful assets, which you in front of me, are responsible for. And I think I think it should be very careful to not lose the effectiveness.
Thank you,
of this
Mr.
policy.
Irwin. That's your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, Councillor Brodovnik, can you hear me now, please? Are you communicating with Councillor Brodovnik?
Yeah, she can't hear us.
No. Can you get her to email or confirm that she's in a private and secure location in case we discuss any confidential items and get a response? Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. We'll move on, and the next in-person deputation is Lynn Deering from the Woodbridge Ratepayers Association. Thank you, Lynn. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, welcome everyone. You might recognise that I'm not Lynn, I'm Lee. I'm a member of the Woodbridge Ratepayers Association, and I'm also an architect, so I'm quite interested in this policy. Firstly, we want to say well done for getting a policy. We think it's fabulous that you're getting a policy up, so we think this is a really good step in the right direction. We've just got an issue with one of the clauses, and we were talking to Patrick about it a little bit earlier, and that's revision number 14, which we feel can be interpreted the wrong way. So our main issue is this revision 14 concerning the new development affecting heritage listed site, which requires it to be readily distinguishable from heritage built form and not impersonate or replicate, authenticate features of a heritage listed place, with the exception of conservation works. Now, what we see this happening in suburbs is that when people read this, it feels like you're meant to put in a modern type building next to a heritage building to not cause any confusion between what is old and what is new. It's also not wanting people to make a pastiche. Now, this is quite an old term because in the 70s and 80s, there was bad heritage that was done. You know, you could put a little project home with a 1 metre wide veranda and call it Federation, and it really wasn't up to scratch. But a lot of the homes built now are very well done and can take on some of the attributes of a street or of heritage in an area. And we felt that this particular clause causes confusion when it's in there. It's a little bit taken out of context from the Borough Charter. So we think the policy is pretty good just taking that out. We suggest instead that you do something like the design details that are in a number of other ones like the City of Stirling or Mount Lawley, where new developments are to be in sympathy with existing heritage character with the following objectives: to ensure that new buildings reflect traditional style, scale and traditional houses on the street pattern in terms of design, setbacks and orientation, retain the appearance of single-storey built form from the street and retain natural ground levels. So that's saying that we're going to keep the street character because we do have a lot of great heritage in this area. We've got some really nice stock in the place, and so we just don't want it to be eroded. There are a few things that have happened, like, for example, where Willing Coffee is, it really does not contribute to the heritage of that street. It's so modern and so different that it's unfortunately really, I do like the building, but I find it completely jarring in that street. So I think that that was a shame, and that is probably reflecting this particular comment. Now, do you want to say anything, Lynn, or you want me to keep going? I'll keep going. Okay. So we think that these things that are put in with the City of Stirling are in line with the WA Heritage Act. We feel that if it was applied, we wouldn't have the carport in front of 134 Swan Street or our curved arches next to Willing Coffee or 24 Chatham Road, none of which enhance or sympathetic to the street character. It should be noted that the council overruled staff recommendations to reject those applications on the grounds of non-compliance. And in the case of 24 Chatham, this reinforces the requirement for a clear policy for councillors to base their decisions on. And revision 14 should be revised or removed with a revised version put at a later planning document that falls under planning policy. So we could accept it, take it out now, but we could revise it in the future if you want to put something else in. In contrast, recent developments adjacent to the heritage listed Wellborn Cottage is a fine example where the house fits in with the street, it looks the same, and it's really not detracting from a beautiful, one of the first buildings ever built here. We suggest the following motion be put on the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. We suggest the following motion be put to council, that revision number 14 be removed from the local planning policy and consideration given to revising in line with the City of Stirling's objectives and incorporate it in a later planning document if required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next item is item 4.3, councillors, proposed outbuilding 8 Fewson Turn, Ellenbrook. It's on page 209 of your agenda. There's one in-person deputation by Mr. Alan Mays from Mays Drafting on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, Mr. Mays. Once you start speaking, you'll have 5 minutes.
Evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name's Alan Mays, and I'm speaking on behalf of Richard and Sarah Guiney, the owners of 8 Fewson Turn, and we're in support of the staff's recommendation to grant approval, planning approval for this application. I won't keep you too long this evening, but I will give you a quick rundown of the application today. The owners are proposing a small storeroom workshop on their residential block in Ellenbrook to complement their existing home, which falls within a bushfire-prone area with a high bushfire attack level. The owners, myself, and the city's planning department have worked closely together for several months now to come to a solution that allows this minor development to be completed, where it does not increase the fire risk or the intensification of land use. As well as discussing this application with junior and senior planners, we've also met the planning manager, Mr. Russell, on site, so we can get a good understanding of the proposal. Due to the size and shape of the block and the proximity of main roads and City of Swan-owned bushland abutting the property, the standard asset protection zone is not achievable. However, under the State Planning Policy 3.7, planning in bushfire-prone areas, development to this kind is still permissible as long as they meet certain criteria and can mitigate the possible fire risk. As detailed in Mr. Russell's report, all possible criteria have been met, such as sufficient firefighting water sources, excellent access and egress, and the best possible block siting and asset protection zone management that is practical and achievable. Along with these planning solutions, the proposed outbuilding is going to be built to the highest possible Australian standards relating to the construction in bushfire-prone areas. Building to such high standards will allow this structure to withstand the highest levels of possible bushfire attack. All the details have been included in Mr. Russell's report. However, if you have any further questions this evening, please feel free to ask me. Thanks again for your time, Mayor and Councillors.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Bowman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the deputation, Alan. Can you advise us what's changed in this application to that of when it was an application for ancillary accommodation?
Yeah, definitely. So originally the owners were looking at having it as a Class 1 structure, which is a habitable structure. They were going to use it due to COVID and things like that. They do a lot of working from home. Given the use as a habitable structure, as detailed in the report, that increases the intensification of land. So what they've decided to do now, they've got some of the materials. They did buy those before the cost went up. They haven't yet erected those. What they're going to do now, obviously with more information and having discussed it with the planning department, DFIS and other bodies, they're looking at having it as more of a storeroom workshop. So what they've done is they've removed all the inside stuff, or they're going to remove the inside stuff, such as kitchenettes, bathrooms and stuff like that. They're putting in some shower heads, a toilet, a basin, those sort of things. And what they're going to use it for now is more of a garden shed, store pool equipment, basically clean out some of the stuff they've got inside their house as well. That'll go into this new storeroom, and that'll free up some space inside their home to use from a bit of working from home space.
So, Mr. Mayor, just my second question. You said you're going to remove the bathroom, but then you said they're still going to have that there. So you've got a utility which includes the toilet, shower, basin, and the kitchen sink still. Is there a need for that in a store/workshop? So is there something other purpose there that provides showers?
There's two reasons for it. Firstly, there was original approval back in the late 2000s, I think it was. When that approval was given, the slab was laid, the plumbing prelay was done. This is mainly to cap off those plumbing prelays, as well as to provide toilet, showers and stuff to wash up before you go inside, if you're dirty, greasy, those sort of things. They've removed all the things like cabinets, cabinetry, bits and pieces, and it's just going to be the plumbing fixtures and fittings now.
Any further questions, councillors? Then I thank you for your attendance, Mr. Mays.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to the next item, councillors, which is item 5.2, Railway Parade and Apple Street Upper Swan Works. It's on page 265 of your agenda, and there's an in-person deputation by Ms. Kerry Rowe. Thank you, Kerry. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and give you a warning when you've got 1 minute left.
My name is Kerry Rowe and I am the chair of the Upper Swan District Ratepayers and Residents Association, Inc. Our association is very grateful attention is being given to the traffic problems that exist along Railway Parade Upper Swan. Our members and residents appreciate any measures taken by the City of Swan to slow traffic using Railway Parade north of Apple Street and to encourage drivers to use the Apple Street Great Northern Highway roundabout. If possible, we would, however, like the City to give an undertaking that should the proposed islands on Railway Parade, north and south of Apple Street, and on Apple Street, west of Railway Parade, be ineffective, then further measures will be taken to ensure there is no return to the previous dangerous driving habits that exist.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Kerry. The association, did it have a position in respect of the left in, left out at Great Northern and Railway Parade?
Well, that's not really part of this at all. That's
I
a separate
realise,
issue. The people who have lived in Upper Swan for 40, 50 years all want to be able to come in and go out the way they have done, you know, from Railway Parade. I mean, tonight was the first night that I have used the new roundabout because my car automatically goes Railway Parade.
Yep.
So I think you will find the people down that end of the Railway Parade have to travel a lot further to come this way.
Yep.
However, it's the traffic along Railway Parade that is our concern at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowman. Sorry, Kerry, there's another question.
Sorry.
Kerry, the 90k speed limit, do you think that's also part of an issue?
That is a huge issue, absolutely huge. Even tonight, going that way on Apple Street, I was nearly cleaned up by a car that was coming along Railway Parade, travelling south, who was not aware that I was travelling east. So it was a near miss. And this is what's happening when cars are going at 90. It's a ridiculous speed.
Thank you.
No more questions. I thank you for your attendance. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Thank you, Kerry. You have a question of staff, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, could staff advise in respect of the 90k speed limit and our previous discussions with Main Roads, have there been any change in Main Roads' position in respect of that speed limit?
Mr. Coaten.
No, there hasn't.
Thank you. That takes us to the next item. It's in Part C of the agenda. C 1.1. It's a notice of motion by Councillor Bowman, North Stoneville Structure Plan. It's on page 406 of your agenda. And the first in-person deputation is Miss Kathy Wilson. Is Kathy here? No, I'll go to the next person, Mr. Dwayne Skook. Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and give you a warning when you have 1 minute left. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Dwayne.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thanks for having me here tonight. My name is Dwayne Skook, and I'm a resident in West Gidgee, a ratepayer in the City of Swan, and chair of the Susanna Brook Catchment Group. And I'm here on behalf of my local community to support the motion put forward by Councillor Bowman. The proposed North Stoneville development site immediately abuts the City of Swan, encompassing the upper reaches of the Susanna Brook catchment, with 2 tributaries entering Swan and the wider catchment. The original structure plan included some concerning issues for the catchment and community, and under any amended plan are unlikely to be resolved. Firstly, the wastewater treatment plant and storage is upstream from City of Swan within a few hundred metres. Expert analysis of the proposal highlighted some major challenges, which included reticulated sewage is not an option, so excess wastewater, nutrient and contaminants remain significant unresolved issues. These include at least 79 known pharmaceutical and personal care product and endocrine disruptor chemicals. There is a high potential of nutrient contaminant leaks into surrounds. The proposed system has too many operational and performance issues with a net positive of contaminated water balance generated by too many allotments under an urban plan. So what happens to this excess? It is likely to be released into the local community of Swan. The health risks of leakage, drift from storage ponds, and any unresolved contaminants released as irrigation. The treated water itself has exposure risks. It is unlikely the natural environment will be able to withstand the release of such high nutrient loading which will be released. All this adds up to health risks to the community and the waterways, which are already under a lot of pressure. In addition to the wastewater, other challenges of uncontrolled use of fertilisers, chemicals and toxins, which would also leave the site and enter the city of Swan. The hydrology issues alone constitute a great risk to the city, and when aligned with the 2021 to 2031 Strategic Community Plan objectives, it certainly challenges items N1.1 to enhance, preserve and protect local ecology and biodiversity of natural ecosystems, N2.2, protect our natural resources for future generations, and S1.1, build a strong sense of community health, wellbeing and safety. Also of note, this system will not be managed by the state-owned Water Corp, but a private enterprise due to the unviable nature of the plant in this location. In addition, the viability is reliant on the Shire of Mundaring purchasing the treated waste, despite them not supporting the proposal. Secondly, the risk imposed on our local community with regards to bushfire safety, including evacuation capacity and the likelihood of entrapment due to traffic, will weigh heavily for locals, not to mention the ability of the local bushfire brigades to safely transit in such an emergency. Undoubtedly, the city will incur costs to support any road upgrades, so not only a financial burden, but an environmental one, as any removal of the natural verges will disrupt wildlife corridors currently existing in the area, once again challenging the strategic plan items N1.1 and N2.2. Any expectation of acceptance of City of Swan ratepayers to help fund services and rectification of any negative environmental effects, including soil contamination, should certainly be reconsidered with no net gain for the city. Finally, as brief an opportunity as this is for such a broad range of issues, it should be noted that despite it being considered in another shire, the Shire of Mundaring is opposing the urbanisation proposal and applied for rezoning to rural, which should highlight the need for oversight and the concerns of any urban structure plan presented. With these community and environmental risks to your residents, the properties and city land, I ask all councillors to support the motion that the CEO submits to council for consideration the amended plan for North Stoneville, which is currently with the WAPC awaiting release for submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Then I thank you for your attendance and your deputation. And the next speaker on the same item is Mr. Peter Brazier. He's the chair of Save the Perth Hills. Mr. Brazier, thank you. You'll have 5 minutes and I'll try and tell you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Councillors. Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight, and we support the motion before you from Councillor Bowman. Save Perth Hills is a community group in the Shire of Mundaring with supporters throughout the Shire and with our local government regions, including the City of Swan. We're WA's longest running local community group, opposed to dangerous and destructive urbanisation of the so-called North Stoneville site for the past 32 years. In 2019, the City of Swan commented on a structure plan 34, North Stoneville, as it's located on the border. The City of Swan objected to the plan, along with almost 1,000 other community submissions. In April 2019, Mundaring Shire Council unanimously recommended to the WAPC that the structure plan SB34 be refused. DFAS also refused it, and in July 2020, the WAPC refused the plan because it failed to comply with 4 state planning policies: State Planning Policy 2, 2.8, 3.4 and 3.7. Satley appealed and 2 years of SAT mediation followed. Satley then sought to amend the plan noting only minor amendments can be made and the plan will still remain urban. Sadly has just presented those amendments to the Department of Planning, and the department will advertise the amendments in due course, enabling public submissions over the next 42 days. The City of Swan will be invited to comment as well. We now raise our concerns of the original plan's reports, so when you hopefully receive the amended plan, you can assess the risk for your ratepayers. The 555 hectare proposed town site is on your boundary. The shared road was historically named Cameron Road, renamed in 2019 to Hawkeston Road to the west and Woolhouse Lane to the east. These two roads aren't connected in the middle and these are on the boundary also of a wetland that continues into North Stoneville but is on your boundary. It has also been identified in the plan's heritage report as an Indigenous site. The wetland is connected to your pristine Susanna Brook catchment in Gidgigana. The plans show this road as joined, but there's no information of how this will be achieved. We've asked Satley and the Mundaring Shire, but have not received an answer. Will Satley destroy the wetland and Indigenous site to connect the road? Will they build a bridge in an attempt to protect the environment and the Indigenous site? Will they expect the City of Swan and Mundaring Shire to help pay for connecting this road? These all remain unanswered questions. Also on the boundary at the highest point of the land is a privately owned and operated wastewater treatment plant, which will be constructed, which is untested on this sort of geology and therefore has a high risk of failure. The report contains little information on the storage ponds. One is an old crack quarry, or whether liners will be used to mitigate leakage. The report doesn't factor in overflow from a major rain event. There's also conjecture around the discharging recycling water to irrigate open space, which includes a creek through the middle of the property that flows into Jane Brook. The plant is proximal to your Susanna Brook catchment, and the risk of a breach or contamination is real and concerning. We're also concerned if the private owner becomes bankrupt, who foots the facility for the ongoing operation and maintenance costs? Despite being on your boundary, traffic impact assessments didn't include projections.
Thank you.
into your
1
city.
minute left.
The 4,000 North Stoneville people will exit onto two roads available, the local rural Rowland and Stoneville roads. Both of these are 2 lanes, undulating with gravel sidings, no street lights and driveways on both sides. And these roads will not support an extra 4,000 people. But I'll close with the most unacceptable risk to us, an urban town site in an extreme bushfire prone area with only Rowland Road and Stoneville Road to escape. Remember, those roads are not being upgraded. Today, the anniversary of the Wooroloo bushfire, where 87 houses burnt down and 11,000 hectares of bush destroyed, we must ensure any development is financially fair, viable, environmentally respectful and safe, not endangering our increasingly bushfire-prone communities. Both the Shire of Mundaring and Safe Perth Hills have submitted an amendment to rezone the land back to rural. Development can occur, but not like this. The scale, financial implications, bushfire danger and environmental destruction of the plan are unacceptable. We
Thank
urge
you, Mr.
acceptance
Brazier.
of this
That's your
motion.
5 minutes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Johnson, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, can the gentleman be allowed to continue? I don't think he's finished.
Well, it's been made clear from when the time they made application to do the deputation, they'll have 5 minutes, and I said it right in the word.
Only had one sentence remaining. We urge acceptance of this motion and ultimately for the City of Swan to say no.
Thank you. And no questions, councillors? Thank you. Your question, Councillor Johnson? Of staff, thank you, Mr. Brazier.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask the CEO if he could provide council before the meeting a map of the area on the City of Swan side showing watercourses, contours and location of Indigenous heritage sites, if that's possible.
Thank you. I see your hand go up this side of the room. No other questions? Then thank you. We'll move to the next item at C 3.5, basketball drainage works in Upper Swan. I have two in-person deputations. This is a confidential item, councillors. So I'll ask Miss Carol Corica to make a deputation on behalf of Julia Tomasevic. Thank you, Carol. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and tell you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I start by making the obvious statement. Our property is the last property that adjoins Susanna Brook and the basketball drainage. We also are the lowest lying property. So therefore, both contribute to ongoing flooding in the land that is known as the flat, because the block is very elevated up the top, Great Northern Highway to where the house is, and then it goes down, and then you've got the flat and the two creeks. Flooding then tends to exacerbate due to blockages in the Susanna Brook caused by fallen branches, trees and rubbish that is built up over numerous years. This then results in our property experiencing backflow from water trying to escape from the basketball drain to the brook, which then lays stagnant on our property for a large amount of times. It is not unusual for us not to be able to use the tractor to go down into the flat area for up to 5 months of the year. Otherwise, the tractor becomes badly bogged. I do have two annexures that I've sort of got diagrammed from the brook. We cannot agree to the proposal that had been previously mentioned that water is piped off some of the first properties up the Hadwell Road end and taken along Railway Parade and then diverted into Susanna Brook, because this then creates a bigger problem for us because we've got more water. I have on the Annexure B how the water is, because there's so much blockage in the Susanna Brook, so that when the water floods from the Susanna Brook, it actually comes across the whole corner of our property, and within time, it's going to basically divide the flat area. And so that option creates us a greater problem, because for a number of years, due to the poor flow of the Susanna Brook, the water is flowing across our property. There is possibility the additional water flowing through the land that it could, over a period of time, cause a large section of the property to be divided. We appreciate that the upgrading of Great Northern Highway seems to have increased to water runoff. When Jonathan came out to the property some months ago and saw my brother and I, he talked about an open drain 7 metres wide that would go through the middle of the property, plus 3 metres for the Swan to have access. Then, so that's a total of 10 metres that's going right through the middle of the property. Then there will be more cultivable land lost for the turning of a tractor with implements. Because half of our property is up on the hill and the other half goes down, this large open drain will alter the natural scenic appeal and devalue our property. Our property has been in the family for 79 years. However, as my mother is now 97, in a couple of weeks' time, the need for us to sell the property sooner than later is increasing each year. We do not agree that upgrading the basketball drainage needs to be addressed in an effort to improve the drainage system. However, we do agree that upgrading is necessary. However, we will only agree that on the proviso that underground concrete pipes are laid through our property so they are not visible. If the work is carried out in the manner requested, we will agree to an easement being lodged on the certificate of title. It also must again be stated that the Susanna Brook is littered with fallen branches, trees,
You have 1
ties,
minute left, thank you.
rubbish. We believe the brook should be cleaned out, if not completely, and certainly to some acceptable level. Otherwise, this problem will possibly continue. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Catalano, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So are you saying that you don't agree with the easement and that you would prefer it to be piped across your property? Is that what you're saying?
We would agree to an easement because even if there's pipes, the easement still has to be registered on the title. So we would agree to an easement being registered on the title, providing it's underground pipes, because of the fact that you're looking down into the middle of the property, going right across this 7-metre drain. I mean, in the old days, the creek used to be kind of that wide, the little creek, which is what they call the basketball drain. But I mean, I'm 75, so I grew up with that little creek being there. For it to be 7 metres, it's just absolutely scarring the property. And then we elevated, looking down on this 7-metre wide drain. I couldn't understand when Jonathan told us that this drain would be 7 metres. We just can't accept that.
Okay, maybe I didn't ask my question properly. So you don't agree with the drain being 10 metres wide?
That's correct.
And you don't agree with it being 7 metres wide?
No, don't agree to any open drain.
But you don't agree to any open drain?
No.
You want it piped?
Yeah.
Great. That's what I wanted to clear up
And
in
then
my
that
mind.
would still have to be registered as an easement.
Yeah, I
on the
understand that,
title.
but that's fine. Thank you for that. I'll get it now. Thank you.
So I do have diagrams. I'm more than happy to leave this written deputation because I have copies, if that's in order. Because I think the diagrams need to be looked at.
If you can leave those, thank you. Any other questions, councillors?
Could I have a copy of the diagrams, please?
We're getting a copy. We'll circulate them to everyone. Sorry, Mr. Russell, Carol, can you just confirm what number Beryl Avenue you are?
No, 1004 Great Northern Highway.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. The next speaker on the same item is Mr. Branko Rudez from 50 Beryl Avenue. Mr. Rudez here.
He was here, but he escaped. He just left.
I'm just waiting to see if he's still in the antechamber.
He's not out there.
No, he's not here. Councillors, you also note that there was a written deputation by Mr. Ray Zanino attached to your run sheet tonight. That takes us to item 6.3, councillors. Councillors' questions in regard to other items on the agenda. Councillor Catalano.
I'd like to ask staff some questions. Okay.
If they're relating to items on the agenda,
Yes,
you can.
thank you. So in respect of the strategic community plan, which is item 2.3, I don't know who to address this to. Who does that? Is that you?
Well, you address it to me and I'll
okay.
correct it.
All right. So the thing is that on page 20, it's page 93 of the agenda, and also on page where are we? Page 113 of the agenda.
Well, let's deal with page 90.
Well, they're both the same thing if they're actually need to refer to both at the same time, because it's about the strategic vision and the strategic aims for the natural environment. Okay. Now, the thing about it is preserve our waterways. This is on page 93. Preserve our waterways, maintain an overall score of at least 80%. Okay, great. Then we go to page 113. And I wonder why we've given Bennett Brook 100% score, given that there was clearing recently. And then I also wonder what's happened to our other waterways. Why aren't they on this strategic plan? And there's quite a few of them. We talk about Susanna Brook here tonight, Jane Brook, Black Blackadder catchment, the Blackadder group, what we're talking about, the Blackadder Creek, and there's probably others that just slipped off my mind. But why are we only referencing Bennett Brook, and why are we giving ourselves a 100% score?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to take the question on notice unless Mr. Coaten wants to make an observation to you. The issue for the strategic community plan is one establishing priorities and objectives. It's not meant to be down to the point where it actually reports back on performance. That would come through in the corporate business plan or any time we report it back through the operational summary, which also comes back to council. I don't know why we've mentioned specifically Bennett Brook, but if you consider what the plan is saying, the overall objective for dealing with this as an important consideration for managing waterways hasn't changed.
Okay then, well I'd like to move that we're going to amend it to include those other waterways as well, because they're being left off.
Mr. Coaten.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. And I believe the information in relation to Bennett Brook was included because that's where we've got the, as a snapshot, where we've got the best information. We've got a lot of information in that area, which is, but some of the other areas we don't. So in terms of measurability, that's why that was in there. And in relation to the 100%, that's not in relation to Bennett Brook. That's the Circle Nutrient Management Scorecard. So that's an annual assessment that's undertaken by the organisation Circle, where each local government is assessed against their work practices in terms of nutrient management, in terms of fertilising near rivers and things like that. And that's where that score of 100% has come from, because for I think the last couple of years our practices have been deemed to meet all their requirements.
Okay, but so what about these other waterways? Where's the reference to them in the strategic plan?
Page 113. On N1.2, the first line item there is the Circle Nutrient Management Scorecard, which is 100%, and the line immediately below it is reduce excess nutrients in Bennett Brook, and the scores for 2021 and 21-22 are included in that.
I'm sorry, the point that I'm trying to raise is, okay, we've got no data for the other creeks, but isn't that a problem for our strategic plan? Because we need to start getting the data for these other waterways. So therefore they should be included in the strategic plan going forward. Then we collect the data and then we have data for all of our waterways, not just one. What do you think about that? Is that something that can be done?
Through the chair, I think we can come back to Councillor Catalano separate to this and look specifically where, if we're talking about targets, then targets to other waterways are referred to. I'm not quite sure why with the original plan we only adopted a target relating to Bennett Brook. Clearly this is something that says the overall objective here is about reducing the nutrient levels of monitored water perennial courses. So I'll take this question on notice for what Mr. Mayor in terms of which water courses are monitored, and in terms of come back to Catalano separately.
Yes.
So who should I be liaising with on this matter until the matter comes up for council next week?
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm happy for the questions to come to Mr. Coaten from the environmental perspective.
No other questions, Councillor Catalano?
Not on that one. I've got another question.
Well, okay. Any other questions from councillors on other items on the agenda? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. The first one is in regard to item 5.2. I just wanted to ask staff, given that in respect of the road matters to do with Railway Parade, and given that at this time, we're not dealing with the left in, left out at Railway Parade and Great Northern Highway. And the responses that we had. What is the long-term plan in respect of that, and how long would it be before we would perhaps instigate anything in that manner?
Mr. Coaten?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's not on our forward works program. It would be intended, I would expect, that it would be done in the next few years. Though noting that the recommendation in the report tonight is for the median island work to be undertaken in 24-25, and the intention is that the left in, left out wouldn't occur until after that was in place. So that would presumably be perhaps later 24-25 at the earliest, or 25-26. So there's not, I don't have exact timings on it though, but it would be probably in that order of magnitude.
Mr. Mayor, what's the driving factor to implement that left in, left out?
Mr. Coaten?
It was a condition placed on the Clementine development for their development, that as part of the traffic management, the traffic study in that area that occurred. So it's a combination of things. The having left in, left out there will reduce traffic volumes of vehicles going down Railway Parade, so they'll be encouraged to go down Apple Street and use the recently constructed roundabout at the Great Northern Highway, which is certainly the preferred and safer method for vehicles to use that area. So the traffic volumes would reduce through that residential area on Railway Parade, and also at the intersection with Great Northern Highway. The roads do come in at a very acute angle near a railway line as well, so it would also improve road safety at that intersection.
Is the Clementine developer paying for the works to create the left in, left out?
They, Mr. Russell may correct me, but I'm very sure that was one of the items that they're making a cost contribution to. They're not paying for all of it, they're paying a proportion of it as a condition of subdivision.
Mr. Mayor, if staff could perhaps give me an indication of what that cost might be, so that we've got an indication of whether we'll do something with this motion.
Thank you. Mr. Russell's nodding his head, so he's got the question and he'll get back to you in due course. Councillors, any other questions on items on the agenda? Councillor Henderson. Yes.
Okay, one more in respect of the inclusive SWAN document. Of course, Mr. Mayor, we all want to have everyone inclusive. I wanted to get a handle on how far this goes.
Have you got an item number? Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
Page 160 odd, so it looks like it's 3.1. So my question would be, if everyone's going to be equal, and that's what I'd like to see, how are we going to deal with if someone identifies as female, a male identifies as female, what are we going to do to deal with that person entering into female change rooms, as an example? How does that fit with this document?
Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The aim of the Access and Inclusion Plan is not to so much focus on trying to ensure equity, but ensure improved access and inclusion to everyone. The issue of how people may identify with regards to gender has changed definitely in society, but that's why we're moving to much more diversified models of change room facilities, so that there are more options than simply male or female change room facilities. So for instance, family change room facilities, unisex facilities, so that there is more options for people to choose from. That will obviously take time. Some of our facilities are moving that way already, but obviously over time we're moving to more modern types of construction.
So, Mr. Mayor, given that we have an enormous amount of facilities out there, and obviously not able to to accommodate the complete openness approach. Have we costed what it's going to take and what the time frame might be, and what the impact would be between what we say in a document and what we can actually provide over time?
Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Coaten, will correct me if I'm wrong, but basically it's done as budgeting each year. We don't have a specific budget to change all our facilities in any short-term period. As buildings come up for renewal, refurbishment or new constructions, that's when we take the opportunity to upgrade.
I want to be clear, we are not able to fully implement and provide for this particular document, it would seem, Mr. Mayor. Is that right?
Mr. Bishop or Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, that wouldn't be correct. The issue for us is establishing a principle. Having established a principle, you seek to implement it for a period of time. Just as this building itself had access and inclusion issues for people with a disability, when you first came in here, over a period of time, modifications were made to provide accessible platforms for people to get into it. So having adopted the principle, it would simply then go into that's the standard by which we would make these events and locations accessible in the future. As to protocols, specifically operating protocols around whether a person who now identifies as female, who may have previously been a male, uses a female toilet, that's outside the principle of what we're seeking to do. We will address those matters operationally, but we're not going to ask someone who's begun the process of transitioning from one sex to another whether they would step aside and not use a particular facility. Common sense extends. If a person is legally identified as a male or a female by law, they are legally able to access and use a particular facility of that nature.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the clarification. Just that I didn't see that detail, if you like, within the document so that people would understand that.
So thank you for asking your questions, Councillor Henderson. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 4.3. If it's later found that it's been used as a living quarters, what's the process there? Does we go through a compliance route?
Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the salient thing, and I know Councillor Bowman's question to the applicant as to what's changed. I think the important thing to note is what's changed is the original application was ancillary dwelling. So it's not so much a question in essence as to whether it's habitable or not. The real question was whether it's an intensification of the type of land use. An ancillary dwelling allows a person that is not a member of the main household to use it. So it's effectively a +1. Now, it's a matter of the building code as to whether or not a shed is a habitable or non-habitable building. But they've indicated here that it's not something they're going to be occupying as a living room. It will be a working space and a storage. So it's not so much a problem from a planning point of view if they are using it, but they've indicated here they won't be putting in facilities for them to live in it, and that's the salient point. So, but if subsequently, for example, they were renting it out for ancillary dwelling, this approval does not cover it, and they would need to do two things: cease that, or make a further planning application for approval of it as ancillary dwelling accommodation.
So my follow-up question then is, if I got it right from the manager, that a member of the immediate family, teenage son, could live in there, and that would be fine.
Mr. Russell.
It's a fine line between ancillary and a habitable dwelling. You could look at it and say it's merely an extension of the existing house. So yes, in essence, that could occur. An existing member of the household could choose to live in it, and from our perspective, from a planning point of view, we're satisfied that it's not, for the purposes of the bushfire planning policy, an intensification of the land use on the site. So yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, my next question is 5.2. Obviously we're deferring the upgrade of the railway crossing, obviously because of a third party. are we still getting, or have we got the money from the developers there? And is that a 12-month delay? And probably more so then the intersection that we're proposing to upgrade with the islands, will that need to consider, and has it considered those upgrades when it happens, but more so what happens now if we upgrade those intersections with the train upgrades?
Mr. Coaten, thank you.
The intention would be to do the rail crossing and this work at the same time. So we are still progressing with the rail crossing in terms of getting the design done for that. So our intention is to try and get them both done at the same time. And I think you asked about the cost contributions. I think so. We haven't received them as yet, but they are paid as the work is undertaken.
Mr. Mayor, my next question is regarding 6.1. I know we can't have a local purchase policy preference with a metro area, but do we, where we can, support and try to source locally and support local business?
Ms. Slade?
I'll just, if I can, Mr. Mayor, refer to my colleague to address the procurement policy element.
Through you, presiding member. Yes, we do, where that's possible.
So is that something that's followed all the time, or is there a process there? Because there appears there's a number of purchases that are being purchased from companies outside the City of Swan, when I know and others have told me that they could provide it. So do we get a quote from those companies? They're obviously too expensive, and we go to another one outside?
Yeah, we obviously operate through that quotation process, and there are a number of factors that the city looks at when procuring. Price is not the only indicator. So it's really a matter of that total assessment. So we will not necessarily just purchase locally, but find and supply if they're a local supplier.
But there's nothing preventing staff seeking 3 quotes, and all 3 quotes are outside the city. Okay.
Correct.
Next question is 1.3. Councillor Johnson's motion is planting green landscaping in front of the wall. Would that have any benefit in reducing the impacts?
Mr. van der Linde.
Mr. Mayor, through you, now planting itself, so trees in front of the wall will not reduce the noise per se.
Okay, just confidential ones now.
Thank you. Any other questions before we, Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, I've just got a question, Mr. Mayor, about item 6.3 on page 322. There's an amount of money, $127,700 being written off. And I wonder if staff could provide a bit more information about the first bullet under details, where it says storage of disused vehicles at unlicensed buildings, town planning scheme 4, etc. I don't quite understand that, and I think that for such a large amount of money, I think as a council we should understand exactly how that debt arose, and therefore why it's being written off.
Ms. Slade, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The unlicensed buildings related to a shed, I believe a swimming pool and no fence of a swimming pool, and I think a patio, and the other item were vehicles that were parked there. Because the debt is so old, we would have to try and extract records from the archives to actually get more detail than that. When we review what's written on the actual invoice that was raised in between 2009 and 2012, it relates to those items that I said then.
So is this fees, or is this fines, or what is it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have the exact breakdown. It's of that $127,700, $8,000 was linked to legal fees when this was taken to court, and the remainder were the fines and prosecution.
It's a slippery fish situation. By which I mean we can't identify the person, we can't chase them down.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go behind closed doors to discuss any confidential matters, councillors? Any more questions? Then we'll can we make sure the live streaming's off, please? Once the live streaming